Josie, what is this? Hi there, guys. Welcome today. I'm just going to sit down and tell you what's been happening in our homeschool for the last 3 months. And goodness me, haven't we had a tumultuous ride? So I think I did a video, the last video I did an update on our family life was probably more than 6 months ago maybe. And my first trimester was really hard. I couldn't do any work. My second trimester was so much better. That was when I managed to do the video finally and get a few more videos out. I think I did one last week on high school curriculum. Goodness me, child, you were very wet. And this is Josie. So she's now 7 weeks old and she is just so beautiful. I ask my husband almost every day, I was like, was she worth it? Because we had a very hard 9 months and and our birth, I'll tell you about the birth story, was really hard too. So I got cholestasis of pregnancy, so I had it with the last two, and that basically means you get really insanely itchy hands and feet, particularly worse at night, and it's really hard to sleep. So you spend any days where it's bad, you spend your nights itching, and I had ice packs on my hands and my feet a lot of the time and just fans on. And with the first two I didn't get light sensitivity, but this time I did. Anytime I went into the light, the itch was particularly bad. So I would spend a lot of my life in this corner of the house that you see me, which happens to be the coolest part of our house. So it was a pretty miserable 9 months. And then they induced me at I was 39 weeks and I think 3 days in the end because I had cholestasis. So they're like, well, we'll keep an eye on it, and because it comes with a risk of miscarriage. And so I was induced at, almost full term, which was great. With the other two, they induced me at 37 weeks and the children came out a little bit underdone and weren't very good at breastfeeding, let's just say that. But this time she was almost fully done when she came out, which was lovely. So I went in for my induction and I was completely underslept because of the cholestasis. So it's a pretty nasty way of doing things. The end of the pregnancy was awful. I didn't want to see anyone. I couldn't do any work. I was struggling to get out of the house, and people would just come and pick up the kids for me and take them for the day. The church was just amazing like that. There were so many people in the church who were incredibly supportive, who would send me messages and bake me meals, even when I was pregnant. And after the baby came, I feel like people remember to bake you meals more then, but for me, I probably needed it more in the last few months than I did when baby came, because I felt so much better when the baby came and I was actually able to get out of bed. So I went into the hospital to have the induction, and then they put the drip on me. And then because I was so underslept, I wanted to do the other two without pain relief, but this time I was like, you know what, I don't care, I'm so underslept, I just want to avoid the pain, because I'd had a lot of back pain and just a lot of pain in pregnancy with this baby, because I have sort of a pain syndrome. It was diagnosed as fibromyalgia more than 10 years ago, so it's just been a lot of pain along the journey. And so I thought, you know what, and so the lady took me through and she said, you can actually have an epidural before the pain gets bad. And so I was like, oh, you beauty, let's do that. And so I did, and it was wonderful for about 10 minutes. It was the first time in months that I had been pain-free. And then I started getting quite a bad itch, and it was much worse than the cholestasis itch. And they're like, oh yeah, it's just a symptom of the epidural. And I'm like, yeah, but this is really bad. This is worse than contractions. And then eventually it started subsiding, but I realized the reason it started subsiding was because I was actually losing consciousness because I was hemorrhaging. And the reason I was hemorrhaging was because the placenta was starting to detach from the inside of my uterus. And they initially were onto it because I was all monitored up, and so they noticed my blood pressure dropping. And then one of the nurses went to do an internal exam. You're just so gorgeous, aren't you? Here's a close-up. Oh yes, you're very gorgeous, aren't you? So she went to do an internal and she found out that I was hemorrhaging really badly. And so after that, she actually kept on applying pressure. And somebody hit the blue button, which means that the whole of the hospital comes running because it's a code blue emergency. I don't know if they call it that in the US, but it was a code blue emergency, which means that there's imminent threat of death. And so because obviously if the baby loses their placental connection, that's their oxygen supply. They're going to die. And if you look up placental abruption, it comes with a huge risk of miscarriage. In fact, since then, I've actually talked to 2 ladies who've known their friends have had placental abruptions and their babies actually died in utero, really advanced. One lady was 37 weeks, the other was, almost fully baked as well. So that was really sad. And obviously post-pregnancy, I just had quite a lot of trauma for that. Anyway, so somebody hit the emergency button, and so it was all very exciting. But I was half unconscious. I don't know if you've ever started to lose consciousness because of low blood pressure. Probably not many of you out there, but you get this awful feeling. I remember one of the doctors yelling at me because I was losing consciousness, saying, "The reason you're feeling so bad is because your blood pressure is so low." And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. I was wondering what that awful feeling was. And so I had half the hospital doctors there, just looking after Josie and I, which was kind of very reassuring. And everybody was like, "You'll be fine," but you could hear the panic in their voices. And I think for me, that was one of the worst things, is just hearing that panic. And then I remember my husband came up halfway through when everything started going belly up, and he said, "What can I do?" And I said, "Just pray." And I was praying so much because I thought, this is, I knew like hemorrhage, babies in there, that's not good. This is really not good. And so I was praying. It actually felt like I was dying, and if they hadn't replaced the blood, I would have died, because I ended up hemorrhaging 2 liters in the end. But I remember completely making my peace with God. Well, I mean, I am in peace with God, but going, I'm ready to die, and God, I'm ready to be with you, but please look after my little family after I'm gone, and especially look after Tristan, because I don't know how he's going to do it with 2 little ones and maybe this little one if I don't make it. So that was just a lovely feeling to know, like, where am I going to go when I die? It was just quite peaceful in the end. But then we got to the theatre, and I remember praying that they'd put me out because it was just such an awful feeling, this low blood pressure. And they did. They got a mask on my face, and I was counting to, when they ask you to count to 10 and you don't make it to 10 because you're out. That's what happened. And then, next thing I knew, so for all I knew, the baby had died, or I didn't know if she was going to survive or anything, which was, again, a really awful feeling. And then I woke up next thing in the recovery ward, just with uncontrollable shaking, just from the shock that it gave to my body. And when I could talk, because it was hard for me to talk, I said, "Is the baby okay?" And just this huge relief. They're like, "Yes, she's fine. She's with her dad. She's in the neonatal ward recovering. And she's going to be completely okay." And I said, is she normal? And they're like, "Yeah, she's fine." I found out later that what had happened to Tristan, my husband, was he wasn't allowed to wait in the delivery, in the operating theatre, because what happens if the baby was to come out dead or I was to die? It would be really hard for him. So he waited outside, but he had a support person. And I think the relief for him, he's not a guy who cries, but I don't think most men are, but he said when they said baby came out alive and mum was okay, he actually ended up crying in the arms of this guy who was his support person. And I thought, oh, that's just beautiful. But when baby was out, apparently she came out coughing blood, so we were pretty close to curtains for this little baby. But he ended up looking after her in the neonatal ward and just had 3 hours of cuddle time with her, which I think is beautiful. So my first one, I tried to go for natural birth for all 3 children, but My first one also ended up in emergency cesarean, and Dad was the first one to hold him as well. And then I did find breastfeeding a little bit hard because, you know, if you're without your baby for a couple of hours, the first couple of hours are really important. But having said that, I found breastfeeding so much easier this time around. And it's interesting recovering from a whole lot of trauma like that, just thinking, I've never really thought, what if the baby didn't come out alive? But this time I keep looking at her and thinking, what an incredible gift this little really is, an eternal being. And yeah, I started getting nightmares about myself drowning or the baby drowning in blood, which was quite traumatic. And I think my day 3 blues, I've never really had them, but they were really, 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 really bad this time around. But then I think I got to day 10, I was still having issues, and I really earnestly prayed, and I said, God, can you help me out here? Would you please take me out? And I've never had a problem since then. So everything, has just been so lovely. The kids have just really loved this Bubba settling in. They've just really welcomed her into the family. There's no competition because Luke's 7 and Penny's 4. So Penny's just acting like another second mother, and Luke is just wonderful. I told her he probably gets the most amount of smiles out of any of us, maybe excluding me. She just loves him, Luke, and Luke will put his face right in her face and talk to her, which is lovely. And I said to him the other day, I said, she just thinks you're the bee's knees. And ever since then, he's been saying, Josie, the bee's knees is here. So as far as homeschooling goes, I have to admit, it's probably the slackest 3 or 4 months I've ever had with Luke. I'm usually really kind of in there helping him all the time, always doing things with the kids, but a lot of the time I couldn't get out of bed, and some days I would just say no homeschooling today, and the kids were over the moon. Well, Luke was over the moon. Penny kind of does a preschool lesson here and there. I don't really make her do it because I burnt Luke out when he started, so I didn't want to. But yeah, we've had a very slack few months, but even so, I found we were a little bit ahead before, but now we're probably doing about average. And he's just finishing year 1. We're January here, so we start our new year, so he'll start his grade 2 curriculum very soon, so he's probably right about where he should be now, and looking forward to it. I actually did an unboxing video because I got grade 2 BJU press, because that's where we're up to, and I went through it really, really quickly with the kids. Well, at least Luke's in the video. So if you want to see that video, you can see it here. I don't have any makeup or whatsoever because I was just like, we need to get this done so he can open up his math because he really wanted to look at it. So have a look at it here. See what you get for grade 2 and see if it's for you. I really like it. I've used it the last few years. So go check it out.